America the great Babylon. One of the things that they pride themselves on is democracy.
You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, Minimax solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments, just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
What are your thoughts on the democracy that America brings throughout the world?
Yeah, you never read Revelation 6 and 8.
No, what does
The pale horse. You remember what they say about the pale horse. Hell and death is what? Is a system America called democracy.
We economic hitmen really have been the ones responsible for creating this first truly global empire. And we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things that benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of the people at all. However, those people, the whole country is left holding a huge debt. It's such a big debt they can't repay it, and that's part of the plan, that they can't repay it. And so at some point, we economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money, can't pay your debt, so sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies. Allow us to build a military base in your country, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote. To have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized and sold to U.S. corporations or other multinational corporations. So there was that whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the way the IMF and the World Bank work, that you put a country in debt, and it's such a big debt it can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest. And you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality or good governance, which means basically that they've got to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems sometimes, their penal systems, their insurance systems, to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy.
Explain it. Hell, you're in a condition of hell, right? While your country have wealth, right? Death, when you don't want to give what's the country have. The gold, the silver. I mean, they're open war with you. That's the death.
It is interesting to me how this system has continued pretty much the same way for years and years and years, except the economic hitmen have got better and better and better. Then we come up with, very recently, what happened in Venezuela. In 1998, Hugo Chavez gets elected president, following a long line of presidents who had been very corrupt and basically destroyed the economy of the country. And Chavez was elected amidst all that. Chavez stood up to the United States, and he's done it primarily demanding that Venezuelan oil be used to help the Venezuelan people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. So in 2002, a coup was staged, which there's no question in my mind, and most other people's minds, that the CIA was behind that coup. The way that that coup was fomented was very reflective of what Kermit Roosevelt had done in Iran, of paying people to go out into the streets, to riot, to protest, to say this Chavez is very unpopular. You know, if you can get a few thousand people to do that, television can make it look like it's the whole country, and things start to mushroom. Except in the case of Chavez, he was smart enough, and the people were so strongly behind him that they overcame it, which was a phenomenal moment in the history of Latin America.
America is a system, therefore democracy is a system, is hell and death that went to your country.
So basically, if you don't accept democracy, they bring war and confusion and chaos to your country.
That's all, man. That's why they said hell and death. Hell is a condition. The death is when you don't want to give the things of the country, the wealth.
So my question is, why so many nations in the world, they get confused and they bow down to the quote-unquote democracy?
Yeah, ex-Iraq.
This is what it's like on the receiving end. Last night, a square mile in central Baghdad seemed like hell on earth. An inferno. ITV News cameras recorded the barrage from hotel balconies, and it was a truly chilling sight. This is going to be a big bang. This is on a completely different scale from everything else that has gone before. This isn't just an attack on bricks and mortar. It is an assault on the human senses, and as you can see, much of the Baghdad skyline, well, it's now flames and billowing smoke. Cruise missiles and bombs brought tons of high explosive to the heart of Baghdad's administrative district. This was about demolishing Saddam Hussein's symbols of power. They also hit at least one of his presidential palaces. During a short lull, ambulance crews took to the streets to tend to civilian casualties. The let-up did not last long, however. More cruise missiles. 300 of these frightening weapons were aimed at Baghdad during the night. The last arrived here as an air raid siren was going off just before dawn. John Irvine?
They bring democracy to Iraq. That's what they said, right?
Yeah, they said.
They said they bring democracy to Haiti, too.
Why did the U.S. control Haiti from 1915 to 1934? The story involves assassination, rebellion, and politics. In 1915, amid political chaos and the assassination of Haiti's president, the U.S. stepped in, claiming it was to restore order and fend off European influence. But what did they really do? U.S. officials took over Haiti's finances, rewrote its constitution, and pushed policies favoring American businesses, especially in agriculture and infrastructure. This led to widespread Haitian resistance, notably the Cocos Rebellion, which the U.S. crushed using military force. In 1934, under FDR's good neighbor policy, the U.S. officially left, but kept a tight grip on Haiti's economy and politics, impacting its sovereignty and development for years. Did you know this?
Right now is what's going on in Haiti. Gang wars. Throughout the world, people have to you have to understand. Then we have to understand as a people. Democracy is not for our people. Democracy is really what the Lord said it is. Hell and death. Death and hell. When America go to your country, win the hell and death, then he call it democracy.
Ecuador for many, many years had been ruled by pro-U.S. dictators, often relatively brutal. Then it was decided that they were going to have a truly democratic election. Jaime Roldos ran for office. And his main goal, he said, as president would be to make sure that Ecuador's resources were used to help the people. And he won, overwhelming, by more votes than anybody had ever won anything in Ecuador. And he began to implement these policies to make sure that the profits from oil went to help the people. Well, we didn't like that in the United States. I was sent down as one of several economic hitmen to change Roldos, to corrupt him, to bring him around, to let him know, okay, you can get very rich, you and your family, if you play our game, but if you continue to try to keep these policies you've promised, you're going to go. He wouldn't listen. He was assassinated. As soon as the plane crashed, the whole area was cordoned off. The only people allowed in were U.S. military from a nearby base and some of the Ecuadorian military. When an investigation was launched, 2 of the key witnesses died in car accidents before they had a chance to testify. A lot of very, very strange things that went on around the assassination of Jaime Roldos. I, like most people who've really looked at this case, have absolutely no doubt that it was an assassination. And of course, in my position as an economic hitman, I was always expecting something to happen to Jaime, whether it be a coup or assassination, I wasn't sure, but that he would be taken down because he was not being corrupted. He would not allow himself to be corrupted the way we wanted to corrupt him.
See, now we can reason and see it clear now. When you start talking about the unjust, the corruption.
Omar Torrijos, president of Panama, was, one of my favorite people. I really, really liked him. He was very charismatic. He was a guy who really wanted to help his country. And when I tried to bribe him or corrupt him, he said, look, John, he called me Juanito. He said, look, Juanito, I don't need the money. What I really need is for my country to be treated fairly. I need for the United States to repay the debts that you owe my people for all the destruction you've done here. I need to be in a position where I can help other Latin American countries win their independence and be free of this terrible presence from the north that you people are exploiting us so badly. I need to have the Panama Canal back in the hands of the Panamanian people. That's what I want. And so, leave me alone. Don't try to bribe me. It was 1981, and in May, Jaime Roldos was assassinated. And Omar was very aware of this. Torrijos got his family together and he said, I'm probably next, but it's okay because I've done what I came here to do. I've renegotiated the canal. The canal will now be in our hands. He just finished negotiating the treaty with Jimmy Carter. In June of that same year, just a couple of months later, he also went down in an airplane crash, which there's no question was executed by CIA-sponsored jackals. Tremendous amount of evidence that one of Torrijos' security guards handed him at the last moment as he was getting on the plane a tape recorder, a small tape recorder that contained a bomb.
Put you to death or they're open war. Ask all the freedom fighters. They're all dead.
It's been nearly 80 years since hundreds of black West African soldiers who fought for France's freedom against Nazi Germany during World War II were killed in cold blood by their fellow white French officers in Senegal in 1944, in what is known as the Thiago Massacre. This is the story of how France treated its black soldiers and took their lives because they demanded their rights, how it then covered it up and erased it from school curriculums, attempting to deny history and lighten the nation's conscience. Known as the Tirailleurs Sénégalais units, these were volunteers and conscripts from former French colonies, serving in the French Army's colonial infantry. Specifically, the soldiers were from Guinea, Mali, Senegal, Burkina Faso, Chad, Benin, Gabon, Ivory Coast, the Central African Republic, and Togo. Those who were killed had all been prisoners of war, held in Nazi Germany's camps during the Second World War. They had been subsequently freed by the Nazis and transferred to a holding facility in Thiaroye on the outskirts of the Senegalese capital, Dakar. The soldiers were upset and demanded equal pay to white soldiers, in addition to their unpaid wages and pensions, and so what was a call for justice was translated by the French as a mutiny. And on the night of November 30th, 1944, white French officers killed their black colleagues held in Thiaroye. The French admit that 35 died, but war veterans say at least 300 black African soldiers were killed.
Wow. Hell and death, brother, that's democracy. Wow. Democracy is a system, brother. then the system, when you choose your religion, democracy brings religion with it too.
So pretty much democracy is a religion.
It's a religion.
Paint as a political
Movement, but it's not. You got CIA under democracy. You got the IMF under democracy.
Furthermore, a cursory glance at the performance record of the World Bank reveals that the institution, which publicly claims to help poor countries develop and alleviate poverty, has done nothing but increase poverty and the wealth gap, while corporate profits soar. In 1960, the income gap between the fifth of the world's people in the richest countries versus the fifth in the poorest countries was 30 to 1. By 1998, it was 74 to 1. While global GNP rose 40% between 1970 and 1985, those in poverty actually increased by 17%. While from 1985 to 2000, those living on less than $1 a day increased by 18%. Even the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress admitted that there is a mere 40% success rate of all World Bank projects. In the late 1960s, the World Bank intervened in Ecuador with large loans. During the next 30 years, poverty grew from 50% to 70%. Under or unemployment grew from 15 to 70%. Public debt increased from $240 million to $16 billion, while the share of resources allocated to the poor went from 20% to 6%. In fact, by the year 2000, 50% of Ecuador's national budget had to be allocated for paying its debts. It is important to understand the World Bank is, in fact, a U.S. bank supporting U.S. interests, for the United States holds veto power over decisions, as it is the largest provider of capital. And where did it get this money? You guessed it. It made it out of thin air through the fractional reserve banking system. Of the world's top 100 economies, as based on annual GDP, 51 are corporations, and 47 of that 51 are U.S.-based. Walmart, General Motors, and Exxon are more economically powerful than Saudi Arabia, Poland, Norway, South Africa, Finland, Indonesia, and many others. And as protective trade barriers are broken down, currencies tossed together and manipulated in floating markets, and state economies overturned in favor of open competition and global capitalism, the empire expands.
The UN under democracy, NATO is under democracy, is a system to rob the dark nations. You understand? Put them to hell and death, brother. That's clear, crystal.
Wow.
Democracy. Where does democracy work at? Only for the white man. Could you go to Africa?
Our next story is from South Africa. It's been 3 decades since South Africa abolished apartheid, a system of racially segregating black people from white people. The country got rid of it in the 1990s, but the spirit of apartheid is still alive in some places. One of them is Orania, a remote town in the country's north, often called the last outpost of apartheid. Why? Because Orania is a whites-only town. Black people cannot live or work here. Every job is reserved for the whites, every task performed by white people. And yet the residents of this town insist they're not racist. Here's a report.
Welcome to Orania, a remote farming town in South Africa's Northern Cape. It prints its own money, runs its own banks, has its own holidays, and manages its own affairs. Sounds like the perfect township to relocate, right? Well, hold your horses. To enter Orania, you have to qualify on certain parameters. The foremost is the color of your skin. It has to be white, because Orania is a whites-only town. The uniqueness is too obvious to ignore. Wherever you go in this township, you will only find Afrikaners. White people with Dutch ancestry. They do all the work, from playing the piano at the church to reading out the Bible to believers, to running the kitchen at a restaurant, to even gardening at orchards. All jobs, big or small, are reserved for white people. But the residents of this town insist that they're not racist.
We are from Africa, that's why we call ourselves Afrikaners. We want to remain here. We also want to retain our identity. Now, to retain one's identity is not a racist impulse. We wanted to retain our identity against the English or the British imperialism also, and they're even whiter than we are, much whiter.
Orania is often dubbed as the last outpost of apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation. South Africa abolished apartheid in the 1990s. But the legacy lives on in Orania. In fact, the township was founded by the son-in-law of Hendrik Verwoerd, South Africa's former prime minister, who's considered to be the architect of apartheid.
What happens with democracy? It kills their people. It has made men as sodomites, right? It takes away all their resources.
This is why the world cannot survive without Africa. Sometimes nicknamed the Mother Continent due to its being the oldest inhabited continent on Earth. Richness in gold. Africa is a major producer of important metals and minerals. Metals exported by African countries include uranium, used to produce nuclear energy, platinum, used in jewelry and industrial applications, nickel, used in stainless steel, magnets, coins, and rechargeable batteries, bauxite, a main aluminum ore, and cobalt, used in color pigments. In 2008, Africa produced about 483 tons of gold, or 22% of the world's total production. South Africa accounts for almost half of Africa's gold production. Ghana, Guinea, Mali, and Tanzania are other major producers of gold. Of minerals in your mobile phone. Most of the electronics we use today are based on several minerals, from aluminum to zinc. In 2021, some 1.5 billion smartphones were sold around the world, up from 122 million units in 2007. As of 2020, nearly 4 in 5, 78%, people own a smartphone. More than half of a mobile phone's components, including its electronics, display, battery, and speakers, are made from mined and semi-processed materials. Lithium and cobalt are some of the key metals used to produce batteries. In 2019, about 63% of the world's cobalt production came from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Tantalum is another metal used in electronic equipment. Tantalum capacitors are found in mobile phones, laptops, and a variety of automotive electronics. The DRC and Rwanda are the world's largest producers of tantalum. Together, they produce half of the world's tantalum. Top minerals per country. Petroleum and coal are among the most abundant minerals for 22 out of Africa's 54 countries. As of 2019, Nigeria produced most of the continent's petroleum, 25%, followed by Angola, 17%, and Algeria, 16%. Metals including gold, iron, titanium, zinc, and copper are the top produced minerals in 11 countries. Ghana is the continent's largest producer of gold, followed by South Africa and Mali. Industrial minerals such as diamonds, gypsum, salt, sulfur, and phosphates were the main commodity for 13 African countries. The DRC is Africa's largest industrial diamond producer, followed by Botswana and South Africa. Botswana ranks #1 in Africa for the production of gem-quality diamonds used for jewelry, mineral wealth. At $125 billion per year, South Africa generates the most money from its mineral resources. Nigeria comes in second with $53 billion per year, followed by Algeria, $39 billion. Angola, $32 billion, and Libya, $27 billion. These 5 countries produced more than 2/3 of the continent's mineral wealth. The world's minerals. According to the World Mining Congress, the world extracted some 17.9 billion tons of minerals in 2019. Asia was the largest producer, accounting for 59% of the world's total production, valued at $1.8 trillion. North America was second with 16%, followed by Europe at 7%. Africa produced about 5.5% of the world's minerals, worth some $406 billion.
That is what democratic does to the Africans, to the Haitians, to the Cubans, to the Mexican. Anywhere this white man goes, wickedness and hell follows.
Exploitation. Privatization of state-owned enterprises. This means that socially important systems can be purchased and regulated by foreign corporations for profit. For example, in 1999, the World Bank insisted that the Bolivian government sell the public water system of its third largest city to a subsidy of the U.S. corporation Bechtel. As soon as this occurred, water bills for the already impoverished local residents skyrocketed. It wasn't until after a full-blown revolt by the people that the Bechtel contract was nullified. Then there is trade liberalization, or the opening up of the economy through removing any restrictions on foreign trade. This allows for a number of abusive economic manifestations, such as transnational corporations bringing in their own mass-produced products, undercutting the indigenous production and ruining local economies. An example is Jamaica, which, after accepting loans and conditionalities from the World Bank, lost its largest cash crop markets due to competition with Western imports. Today, countless farmers are out of work, for they are unable to compete with the large corporations. Another variation is the creation of numerous seemingly unnoticed, unregulated, inhumane sweatshop factories, which take advantage of the imposed economic hardship. Additionally, due to production deregulation, environmental destruction is perpetual, as a country's resources are often exploited by the indifferent corporations while outputting large amounts of deliberate pollution.
Is that democracy? Is that for the people, by the people? Because it's not working for the people of Haiti. It's not working for the people of Africa. It's not working for the people of Cuba. It's not working for anybody where the white man says, let's bring democracy to your land.
El ataque de satanizar a Chávez. Los medios lo que empiezan a armar es un Chávez perverso, terrorista, un Chávez quizás como que el diablo del continente.
La dictadura de un hombre.
¿El presidente de la República está loco?
Una declaratoria de insanía mental del presidente de la República.
Un loquito.
Por supuesto, la oligarquía venezolana no, como decimos nosotros aquí, no se podía calar esa, ¿no? Entonces estaba perdiendo el espacio, estaba perdiendo la posibilidad de mantener el poder y comienza a aliarse con elementos extranjeros.
Venezuela's opposition found a powerful ally in the Bush government, incensed that Chavez had criticized the US's so-called war on terror.
Y nosotros seguimos pidiendo hoy todavía, después de mes y medio, casi 2 meses, Dios mío, por la paz. Que se busquen soluciones al problema del terrorismo, sí, que se busque a los terroristas, pero así no. Así no. Miren estos niños estaban vivos ayer, estos niños estaban comiendo con su padre y les cayó una bomba de las que están lanzando sobre Afganistán. Esto no puede ser. Un error y van a seguir cometiendo errores. Pedimos que se piense y que se rectifique a tiempo. Clamamos por eso. Lo vuelvo a repetir. Después de más de un mes, aquí lo dije, no se puede responder al terror con más terror.
Chavez's enemies sprung into action. In January 2002, Venezuela's opposition organized a huge demonstration against the government.
Entonces comenzó lo que tiene que ver con las movilizaciones de calle. O sea, cuando comenzaron todas aquellas grandes marchas y todo eso, entonces mostraba músculo de la oposición y mostraba músculo, por supuesto, el lado de la izquierda, el lado revolucionario y todo eso. comenzaron los medios de comunicación a transformarse en partidos políticos. Nunca se me olvida que estuvieron aproximadamente unos 3 días, completamente, todos los grandes canales privados del país, completamente vinculados uno con otro, o sea, encadenados. Tenían la misma imagen, era como una especie de telemaratón, ¿no? Entonces, pero era sobre la oposición, pasando marchas de la oposición, entrevistando a gente de la oposición, haciendo todo ese montón de cuestiones.
In February, a senior Navy officer, Admiral Carlos Molina Tamayo, used the private media to publicly demand that Chavez resign. Around this time, Venezuelan opposition leaders visited Washington for a series of meetings with senior US government officials. When they returned, the opposition's calls for Chavez to resign became deafening. But Chavez refused, deciding instead to press on with his government's reforms.
La otra opción era negociar con estos sectores, pactar con estos sectores y cambiar el curso y la velocidad del cambio. Chávez no acepta estos dos primeros chantajes, el chantaje empresarial, chantaje militar. Golpe de Estado en abril.
The coup was set in motion on April 11th, when Chavez's opponents organized a massive rally outside the opposition-controlled state oil company, PDVSA. The private media were ready to play their role in what would turn out to be a carefully prepared plan.
Venezolanos, todos a la calle. El jueves 11 a las 10 de la mañana, marchemos todos unidos por Venezuela. Desde el Parque del Este hasta PDVSA. Trae tu bandera por la libertad y la democracia. Venezuela no se rinde. Nadie nos va a derrotar.
Escuche lo que dice Venezuela.
Once the rally organizers had whipped up the crowd, they ordered the protesters to march towards the presidential palace, Miraflores.
Los convocan ahí y ahí dicen, bueno, vamos a Miraflores, pues. Pero en Miraflores estamos nosotros.
At Miraflores, Chavez supporters were waiting, ready to defend their president.
Y ahí comienza todo esos elementos. Ellos sabían desde el principio que el choque entre las dos marchas iba a ser horrible.
Events exploded when snipers hidden near Miraflores started firing on both groups. The plan to overthrow Chavez was now fully activated. Chavez supporters also came under fire from the opposition-controlled Caracas police. A few of these supporters, on a bridge near Miraflores, were armed and returned fire on the police and snipers. At least 19 people died and hundreds were wounded at the hands of the police and snipers. But the private media doctored reports of the bloodbath to make it appear as if Chavez's supporters had carried out the killings and that Chavez himself was directly responsible.
El quien hasta ahora fue presidente de la República probó con la actitud de hoy las denuncias que se venían haciendo de su intención dictatorial.
El jefe del Estado es el principal responsable.
Usted es un asesino.
Soon after, high-ranking military officers appeared on TV denouncing the deaths and demanding that Chavez resign.
Con francotiradores, para este momento van 6 muertos y decenas de heridos en Caracas.
But this message had been recorded before anyone had been killed.
Nosotros estábamos pronunciando antes de que hubiese el primer muerto. El pueblo de Ciudad no vio hoy, el ejército ni la Fuerza Armada hizo un disparo. Todo esto fue nuestras armas fueron los medios de comunicación.
A CNN correspondent also later confirmed this sinister plan.
En esa prueba ya se habla de muertos cuando todavía no había un solo muerto en la calle.
Thanks to this clearly planned media setup, Chavez had now lost the support of the Army High Command and was kidnapped to an island off the coast of Venezuela. The church gave the coup its blessing, and the next day, Pedro Carmona, a business leader, was installed as the head of the new dictatorship. Chavez had been overthrown, and Venezuela's private media had played a pivotal role.
Buenos días, tenemos nuevo presidente.
En Venevisión nos sentimos orgullosos de nuestra contribución a la patria.
Debo decirlo, gracias Venevisión, gracias RCTV, y nosotros tenemos que decir, tanto Venevisión como RCTV, gracias Televen, gracias CMT, gracias Globovisión, gracias medios de comunicación.
Let's bring freedom to your land. Because when the white man says freedom, he says slavery. That's what he means. That's what he really means.
You know, this revolution is filled with so many ironies, really. First you tell us that it is manly to keep your word. All right? If you are a man, you keep your word. And now all that the black people in this country are demanding, and even the black people in the whole world are demanding, is that you keep your word.
Think the U.S. government kept its word with native tribes? Think again. Over the years, the U.S. made more than 500 treaties with native nations, and broke nearly every single one. Tribes were promised land, peace, and protection. But as soon as gold was found or settlers wanted more land, those promises were tossed aside. The Black Hills were guaranteed to the Lakota, then stolen for gold. The Cherokee were promised safety, but forced onto the Trail of Tears. How do you think history would look if those treaties had been honored?
You told us we were free. Well, then show us that we're free. You told us that there is justice, equality for all in this country. Well, then stick to your word and let us see the justice and equality for all. Or else admit to us that you're not a man, you're a worm, you're afraid of us, you're afraid to give us equal stand. You're afraid that if you give us equal ground, that we will match you and we will override you. And if that's what you're afraid of us, then tell us that's just what you're afraid of. But don't keep hiding it from us and holding this up to us, and every time we ask you for something, you give us a little bit of something, and it's all tokenism. We don't want tokenism. And there are most black men in this world that don't want charity. And yet still every time we ask you for something, you give us a little piece, a little piece. You're playing games with us. We're not children. We're big men. I've seen my father have to put up with all kinds of stuff. He was a big man. He raised a family. He went down south, and he had to go around to the back door with his wife. We're not asking for anything. We're not asking for any favors. All we want is what's ours. Now, there are many black veterans who are coming back, and they're mad. They're angry. Do you think that they're going to sit down through this? Our fathers didn't have the knowledge that we have. They sat through it. But there are other black youth that are not going to sit through it. We know about Che. We know about Fanon. We've read the books of our revolution. We've listened to Mao and his quotations. We know where we stand. We're not going to sit for it. We're asking, and if we ask and we don't get, we're prepared to stand up and take it. If I ask a man, I tell a man I am hungry. I tell him I am cold. And I ask him to do something about my condition. And this man holds a loaf of bread right in front of me so I can see it, and I keep asking him, I'm begging him to please give me a slice of the loaf of bread. I am hungry. Then it is known by every psychologist that the next step in the progression is I am going to knock him upside the head and take the bread from him. I'm not going to starve to death. All we're asking, no one wants to see blood. No one likes the smell of blood. No one wants war. Anyone who's been in war doesn't want war. Everyone knows what it is to see the inside of a man's gut hanging out and see your friends die, see relatives die. No one wants to regress back to the state of mind where you have to think it's all for the cause, therefore my mother has to die, my wife has to die, my brothers and sisters have to die. No one wants that. But you're pushing us to it. You're leaving us no choice. We're asking, we're begging. The students up at Columbia, they ask. The brothers down south ask. The brothers in Latin America, the brothers in Africa, they're all asking. All they're doing is asking. Our fathers asked. Our grandfathers asked. The presidents of our universities, our colleges had to go to your back doors to beg that their children be given just enough money so that they could be taught something to live off. And yet still they ask and ask and ask, and you refuse to give them anything. Now, we're just about out of patience. We're not going to ask anymore. The news media says that it's only the young that are militant, only the young that want this and want that. Okay, but we're 40% of the black population now. Or we were a year ago, and still yet we're climbing. Before long we'll be 50%, 55%, and then we'll have the command. we're not going to take it. We're not going to take sitting in rotten parks and in places that just aren't fit for living. We're not going to take it. There's a limit to a man's patience, and everyone knows that God, Christ, heaven, everyone knows that what we're asking is not $1 million. All we're asking for is humanity. We're asking to be allowed to live like human beings. And God, you tell us that this is too much to ask. You're sick. You're definitely sick. How can you tell me that it's too much to ask to be a human being?
Yo, Deke, you saw how the young man kept talking about how the treatment of this country toward our people, it just, something is wrong with these people. It's like they sick. You heard him say they kept saying that they sick. What you think about that, Deke?
Man, America not only sick, America is a disease. So our people have to acknowledge that, first of all, because Scripture talk about that.
Right.
Right?
Right. In Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4, it said that his soul is not upright in him, meaning God made him that way. He's really sick. He's not right.
You people, you're not a race. You are a virus. You destroy the world. Everything beautiful you poison. You drag us from our homes. You rape our daughters, murder our sons. You crack our spines and do all you can to break our will. You stab us. Then you put the knife in our hand and tell us it's our fault. And if you don't do it yourself, you stand by, close your eyes, and pretend there's nothing wrong. And then you pray to your God,
Jesus Christ,
to silence our screams so that you can enjoy the happiness that we built for you.
Gay!
With our blood. But it's not your fault. It's the only way you know how to be. And the only thing that will change anything is if another virus comes along and does to you what you do to us. And I hope that happens very soon.
Our people put all their trust in America. You remember Isaiah 30 verse 2 talk about that.
Right.
Remember, even though you go to the next chapter, Isaiah 31 verse 1, we have put our hope in this place.
Right.
That's why our people is confused. They have to turn back to God, keep God's commandments,
Right.
and learn the right way of life.
Right.
Because this is not our kingdom. This is the Gentile kingdom. They're
Right.
going to treat us ruthless.
Right. And remember in 2 Thessalonians 2 and 8, it said that the wicked must be revealed. So how do you think that's going to happen, D?
It's happening right now as we speak. But think about it, right? The whole world is pushing something. America is pushing something. America is selling something.
Right.
What you think it is? It's death and hell, bro. That's what they call democracy.
Right.
Death and destruction. That is the white man's motto. You want to ask me if I love America? The white man says America is a democratic nation.
Are you happy with America today?
I'm happy with myself, but of course I'm not happy with America today.
What is it about the nation, the republic, that disappoints you the most? Is it exercise of equal justice and dignity for all? Is it a failure because you think we're an imperial nation? Is it something else?
America is afraid of itself. It is totally afraid of its own history. It has never dealt with it successfully. It really thinks it's something that it isn't, you know.
We think we're something we aren't.
Yes,
What
I
is
mean,
it
for
we think
instance,
we
we
are?
think we are a democracy.
We do.
Yeah,
I do.
you do, don't you?
I
But
do.
that's because you're a white man. It's a democracy for you. It is not a democracy for black people. It is not a democracy
Why isn't it
for...
a democracy for black people?
Well, start with me, let us say. You know, Charlie, I had to risk my life in order to vote. Poor people today, black poor people, many of whom are in prison, I think you may have noticed. This is not a democracy that when you come up against a system that has crushed you for generations, the system that then puts you in prison, this is not a democracy. The lie of the country is that, somehow this is a democracy after you have killed off the people who were here originally, and enslaved the rest of us.
For the people, by the people.
Few particulars that make Omaha different from New York are just incidental. The problem exists because white people think they're better than black people, and they want to oppress us, and they want us to allow ourselves to be oppressed.
This is I agree with you perfectly. This is the basic problem.
Then what do you
that white people
think
they're better than others?
We won't talk about gender inequality of pay, because a lot of the women who've stepped forward, and I stand in solidarity with them, okay? What they're getting paid, which is half of what a man is getting paid, well, we get probably a tenth of what a Caucasian woman gets. And I'm number one on the call sheet. And then I have to go in and I have to hustle for my worth. That's what I feel like I'm doing. When I demand what I feel, listen, I have more than a 30-year professional career. I had a friend who said, yeah, but Viola, your career is better than my career. I said, yeah, but you can't compare me to you. Because once again, I got the Oscar, I got the Emmy, I got the 2 Tonys. I've done Broadway, I've done off-Broadway, I've done TV, I've done film, I've done all of it. I have a career that's probably comparable to Meryl Streep, Julianne Moore, Sigourney Weaver. They all came out of Yale. They came out of Juilliard. They came out of NYU. They had the same path as me, and yet I am nowhere near them. Not as far as money, not as far as job opportunities, nowhere close to it. And yet, I have to constantly get on that phone, and I have fabulous agents, by the way. They are getting it. But I have to get on that phone, and people say, you're a black Meryl Streep. You are, and we love you. We love you. There is no one like you. Okay, then if there's no one like me, you think I'm that, you pay me what I'm worth.
Deke, you see a lot of the times our people like to go to school, they get these fancy degrees, these titles, they become entertainers, but they still want to be acknowledged by the so-called white man. We want equal pay. We want to be treated justly. But why do you think that we never get treated equally to them?
Because our people don't know that they're in the land of what? Their captivity. Because you remember earlier, we talked about Luke, right?
Right. Luke 1:71, where it said that we should be saved from our enemies, and those that hate us will be the ones ruling over us.
So how we expect equal pay?
Right.
The scripture is clear. Say we are above these people, right?
Right. Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 6, we are above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
So our people need to turn back to the Bible and understand their own history. Why they're here. This is not a place of their rest. You remember what the scriptures say about?
Right. Micah chapter 2 and verse 10. This is not our rest. We were made slaves here, and we were brought here to serve. We wasn't brought here to be comfortable.
So what the hell is she complaining about? She have to know her history.
Right.
She got to know that this is a place that the enemy chained her and chained her children and chained her father. She have to know that this place is the place that do us much wickedly, man.
I can't solve the problem. You guys pull the strings that close schools. You guys draw the boundaries that keep our kids restricted to the ghetto. You guys write up the restrictive covenants that keep us out of houses. So it's up to you to talk to your brothers and your sisters and persuade them that they have a responsibility. We've assumed ours for over 400 years, and we're tired of this kind of stuff now. We're not going to suffer patiently anymore. No more turning the other cheek. No more blessing our enemies. No more praying for those who despitefully use us. We're going to show you that we've learned the lessons you've taught us. We've studied your history, and you did not take over this country by singing "We Shall Overcome." You did not gain control of the world like you have it now by dealing fairly with a man and keeping your word. You're treaty breakers.
They called them peace treaties, but for native tribes, they were anything but. From the moment Europeans arrived, the U.S. government made over 500 treaties with native nations. Every single one was either broken, ignored, or rewritten to benefit settlers. This is the story of the Trail of Broken Treaties. Tribes like the Lakota, Cherokee, and Nez Perce were promised land forever until settlers wanted it. When gold was found in the Black Hills, the Treaty of Fort Laramie was tossed aside. When the Cherokee took their case to the Supreme Court and won, the president ignored it and forced them onto the Trail of Tears. Some treaties were signed under threat. Others were changed with one-sided negotiations that tribes had no power to fight. Even after Native leaders fought for their land in U.S. courts and won, the government still refused to return what was stolen. The Supreme Court even ruled that Native treaties could be broken at any time. So what good is a promise when one side never plans to keep it?
You're liars, you're thieves, you rape entire continents and races of people. Then you wonder why these very people don't have any confidence or trust in you. Your religion means nothing. Your law is a farce, and we see it every day. You demonstrated it in Alabama. And I can say you because you're part of the whole system. You profit from it. In fact, you make your living from it. You couldn't walk around and talk to people, stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach nice little songs and say, now we're going to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and old Jesus be among us. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated, just like everything else you tried to force upon us is contaminated.
Well,
so you can have him. And here's what I'll say. I wish you would follow Jesus like we followed him. Because if you did that, then we'd be in charge tomorrow. I think the problem is so bad that we can have no understanding at all.
You think it's gotten to the point where there can never be that reconciliation?
No. You talk about justice, and it means one thing to you, and we talk about it and it means something else to us. And it'll always be that way. And I'd like you to know I have a terrible feeling against preachers because I think you guys are the ones who are largely responsible for the problem in the first place. And you can accept it or not any way you choose. And for you, this may be an excursion, you know, across the line.
What about the person that wants to listen? I genuinely feel that I want to listen.
Well, if you listen and try to do something, you get kicked out of your church. See, that's the way your people are.
But when the hell has America ever been for the true Jews?
The South today is really not much different than the rest of the country. But the Old South, that's another story and what the Rosewood Massacre is all about. 60 years ago, Rosewood in North Florida was a thriving little community of about 200 people, almost all of them black. Early in January 1923, some 1,000 whites came to town, and when they left about a week later, Rosewood had been burned to the ground. No one knows for sure how many people were killed there. The figures might be as high as 40. For 60 years, the story of Rosewood remained secret and was only uncovered recently by Florida newspaperman Gary Moore, who is writing a book on the massacre at Rosewood. Minnie Lee Langley never even told her family.
I didn't want them to know that I was scouting through the woods to stay out there all night long, out there in that cold and all that stuff. I didn't
Running
want
for your life?
Trying to save my life. I didn't want them to know just how I come along, you know, through all of this and what the white folks had did to us, because I thought it was really mean. What they did to us was mean, and did it without a cause.
Did he bring democracy to the natives? Was it democratic to put us in chains? Getting bull-whipped?
Whippings were very common, and that was a legacy of slavery. These men, and one thing you notice is that when these Ku Klux whip people, they know how to whip people. They know what kind of tree branch to use to get whatever effect that they want. You have to remember that whipping can be deadly, particularly in this era where you don't have the antibiotics. You get an infection. A couple weeks later, out of in terrible agony, you die, you know, from just the open wounds caused by these whippings.
It's very important to understand that in lynching an individual, their goal was to intimidate the whole mass. That is what terrorism is. And to a very large extent, they succeeded, because while slavery was abolished, the complete subordination of African Americans continued. Unable to vote, unable to get decent jobs, unable to have education, unable to have health care. It was a very successful campaign by a small terrorist organization.
The Klan and its so-called men of justice began to get a reputation. Groups sprung up across the South, and recruitment exploded. The Klan still needed a charismatic leader to lead the fight. For the role, they chose a military man, a hero to Southerners from the War of Secession, General Nathan Bedford Forrest. A former slave trader, he had committed a number of war crimes during the war.
During the Civil War, Nathan Bedford Forrest presided over the massacre of 300 to 400 black men who were surrendering. They were actually Yankee troops. They were surrendering to Forrest's troops, but Forrest allowed his troops to run rampage and, in fact, encouraged them to and murder all of these people. I think that really tells you what the Klan was all about. Nathan Bedford Forrest was a slave trader, a war criminal, and the first leader of the National Klan at its most violent moment.
With Forrest in the lead, the Klansmen began to take more punitive action. The violence reached its peak in 1868. With the presidential elections approaching, dozens of courthouses, churches, and polling places went up in smoke. More than 1,000 murders were committed in 4 weeks. Former slaves could not be allowed in any case to exercise their rights. Doing so would upset the system of white dominance. The victims were not chosen randomly.
Having our families separated one from another?
Public housing project in familiar red brick, Perry Homes. It is like most such projects in most big cities. And cemented into the red brick are a series of public policies that work against the children of the poor. Because housing for the poor is scarce, the 1,100 apartments hold not the officially registered 6,000, but with unofficial residents, relatives, and friends, more like 8,000. Because mothers travel up to 4 hours a day to work in downtown office buildings or suburban homes, their children are left to care for each other or for themselves, and drug abuse is rampant. Because family planning measures have lagged, there are many teenage mothers.
Do you find that there is an incidence of young girls becoming pregnant?
Yes, we have a high rate of that too.
At about what age?
Well, I used to say age 14, but I think I'm having to back up and say age 12.
Because the poor are shortchanged on education, it may take 2 years to get testing for a child with learning problems. And the Perry Homes schools have reading levels among the lowest in the city. Because Perry Homes was planned on a minimum budget, there are few places for children to play. Because of the same kind of planning, Perry Homes has no doctor, no dentist, no pharmacy. Nearby there is a well baby clinic, but no sick baby clinic. And the sick must travel 12 miles to wait for attention at Grady Memorial Hospital. And partly because of the general rule that welfare is cut off if there is a man in the house, fathers are often driven away so that mother and children can eat.
85% of the head of household is a woman, because most of the men who should be in the household, they cannot make a decent living. And of course it is better to know that a child will be fed 12 months out of the year than 3 months, which during the summer when construction work you can make a decent living.
The man in the house rule was written to prevent welfare cheating, to make sure that aid to families with dependent children would go only to families headed by mothers. But the effect of the man in the house rule is to create for children an atmosphere of investigation and surveillance, and thus the welfare system in its operation turns out to be a system to make life harder for children.
The welfare system helps the disintegration of the American family. It offers money to families if the fathers will leave them and stay away, in that sense undoing the very stability of the family and taking away one of the two parents that children, of course, need. And what I have seen, I'm afraid to say, all over the country is that the legal system works against the best kind of home for these children. We don't encourage parents to be at home with the children. We don't encourage mothers to feel that they can find their destiny as mothers. We take away, in many of the most vulnerable homes, fathers from those homes. We herd foster children together in institutions rather than trying to find decent homes for them. We don't tap the resources we have in communities and with respect to older people so that they can help out vulnerable homes. We don't sanction and encourage and support in every way, morally, psychologically, and financially, the dignity and integrity of the home. And in the worst of it is that the homes that are most vulnerable are the homes that are least supported by the policies of local, state, and federal governments. And no wonder then, out of these more vulnerable neighborhoods, we get an endless cycle of troubled, delinquent, wayward youth who grow up even more and become the lawbreakers of our society. Now, I don't know how you break this cycle except by starting out with young children.
Is that democratic, Mr. White Man? Did I vote for that, Mr. White Man?
As of 1960, 2/3 of all Black American children were living with both parents. That declined over the years until only 1/3 were living with both parents in 1995. Among Black families in poverty, 85% of the children had no father present, close quote. So it's not the legacy of slavery that destroys the African American family.
It's the legacy of the welfare state.
And by the way, we see illegitimacy rates rising among everybody.
Yeah, and in other countries.
And
you know, the very same thing in England.
And what's the mechanism? Why does the welfare state dissolve the family structure?
For one thing, it makes it unnecessary for fathers to support their offspring. And in fact, it makes it counterproductive in many cases. A very poor man who might be able to support his family realizes his family will be better off without him. But on the other hand, someone who's strictly irresponsible, either the man or the woman or both, now pays no price for being irresponsible. The taxpayers pay the price. And actually the harm done to the taxpayers, which is serious, still is not comparable to the harm done to the families, and especially the children.
To the kids.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't Jim Crow segregation.
This series of laws ensured the strict separation of races. Any perceived challenge to the racial hierarchy could quickly escalate into violence.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
I don't believe in segregation, I believe in slavery.
150 years of exclusion, violence, and rage. A tale of cruelty whose ghosts still haunt the United States.
Having our mothers and daughters getting hosed down in the streets. Dogs sicked on them.
We were in Kelly Ingram Park. Every day we would meet right in that park. And we was there getting ready, getting our assignments. Where was we going to march from that day? Bull Connor, he called out the Birmingham Fire Department, told them, turn the water hose on them niggas, and they won't have to take a bath. He ordered that. That was an order, direct order from him, and that's what they did. And today I'm deaf in one ear because of that.
Oh no, maybe it's when you put crack in our neighborhoods, sending our fathers off to prison.
Okay, let's take rap music.
Let's take it.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons. So,
literally the same people?
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. So, you know, it seems really kind of suspicious, if you want to say that word, that, you know, the records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
But they didn't make you write those lyrics.
It's not about making It's not about making somebody write the lyrics. It's about being there as guardrails to make sure certain songs make it through and certain songs don't. Certain flavors are exposed on the record. You know, some records are made by committee, meaning record company guys sit around and tell the artists, this is hot, say that, do this. We're gonna have this guy write the lyrics. We're gonna have that. So the narrative is really kind of, you know, structured and really made into what the record company want the record to be, and what the, you know, a lot of artists are frustrated with this kind of music making. You know, a lot of people, you know, feel like they're being controlled by the label. This is how they do it. Telling you what songs to sing, what hooks to do, what songs, you know, you can do your song, that's fine. That's an album cut. But you wanna, the single is what we all say is the single. So you have, you know, the record company pushing the narrative, you know, and you know, so this to me is in somewhat, you know, some social engineering going on here to make sure those prisons stay full.
Having our mothers addicted to crack. Was that democratic, Mr. White Man? No. America has never been democratic. It's never been for the children of God.
In addition to the creeping fear of communism, white supremacists were also worried about returning African-American GIs.
After the Second World War, we had enormous numbers of black servicemen coming back to this country for the first time. And they had seen in Europe, particularly in France, but in many countries, that they were treated completely different. They were treated as if they were actually people. Plus, they had, for the first time, borne arms. They had been given weapons. Many of them had shot white people. So people came back, African Americans came back to the United States with a completely changed sensibility about who they were. I fought for my country. I fought against racism, against anti-Semitism. Why can't I be a full citizen like everyone else?
Much effort had been expended within the United States on the part of African-American intellectuals, African-American journalists, African-American organizers, and institutional heads to say, you can't fight a war against repression and reaction abroad and not address repression and reaction at home. There needs to be two victories, the victory against fascism and the victory against racism in the United States.
Faced with such old-fashioned discrimination, African Americans protested to exercise their rights. Many veterans refused to give up their seats in public transportation. There were more and more incidents. White Southerners weren't ready to accept this thirst for freedom.
The Ku Klux Klan returns to the South. Complete with traditional white hoods, the sheet shortage notwithstanding, about 700 Klansmen prepare for the first meeting to be photographed since 1941. The assembly point atop Stone Mountain is 16 miles east of Atlanta, Georgia. Klan leaders predict similar revivals throughout America.
In October 1946, the organization was taken over by Samuel Green, a member of the Klan since the 1920s. A doctor from Georgia, Green began organizing ceremonies and doing extensive advertising. He sold the rights to film them to the media, including to Life magazine.
We don't hate the Negro. God made him black, and he made us white. And you will find this laid out in the 11th chapter of Genesis, in which he segregated the races. And we, knowing that for 5,000 years the white man has been the supreme race, we, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, intend to keep it the white race.
Only for the children of Satan
At the same time that the Klan was hosting wholesome activities by day, its crimes continued in the shadows. Lynchings of African Americans became more common. The federal government turned a blind eye.
Photos from lynchings would be sold and used as postcards. There would be souvenirs from these sorts of events. People would want to take pictures in front of someone who was victimized in a lynching. So these are acts that involved, directly or indirectly, tacitly, broad swaths of the white population.
My former name is Joseph Moore. I was a confidential informant for the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force from 2007 to 2017. If the KKK had a target, it would be me.
For a period spanning 10 years, Joe Moore, a married father of 3, lived a secret double life as an FBI informant, a key asset in the agency's effort to investigate the Ku Klux Klan. Moore helped the federal government foil at least 2 murder plots in Florida, according to federal agents who testified in court. He was also an active informant when the FBI exposed Klan members working as law enforcement officers in Florida at the city, county, and state levels. By 2014, he'd become a Grand Nighthawk, or security officer in the KKK. It was then that he was approached by 3 fellow Klan members who were current and former guards at a state prison. They wanted his help to murder a black inmate. One of those guards was Charles Newcomb, the exalted Cyclops of the Florida chapter.
Over the 10-year span of my operations, I uncovered people that were former military, current military, former law enforcement, current law enforcement, state, local, and county level.
Moore says the 3 current and former prison guards implicated in the murder plot were also actively recruiting new Klan members at the prison.
From where I sat with the intelligence laid out, I can tell you that none of these agencies have any control over any of it. It is more prevalent and consequential than any of them are willing to admit. If you want to know why people don't trust the police, it's because they have a relative or a friend that they witness being targeted by an extremist who happened to have a badge and a gun.
Lynchings often went far beyond the stereotype of simply hangings. People may be shot, they could be burned alive, they would be tied to the back of automobiles by the time we get to the 20th century and dragged through the streets and then have their body displayed publicly.
And what you often had in some of these lynchings was the actual molestation of the body of the lynched person. They, to be crude about it, one of the things they loved to do would be to cut off a man's penis and stick it in his mouth. Some of that was so sexualized that there also might seem to be some kind of white anxiety about black sexuality.
It was a ritual that was meant to publicly demonstrate to both blacks who heard the stories and whites who witnessed the crime that racial domination was something that would be enforced within society. So it was a cultural process. It was a performance, a very macabre performance, as much as it was a kind of attempt to take legal matters into the hands of vigilantes. And in that sense, it meant to organize society. in the same sort of way that a book or a speech or a sermon at church is meant to tell you what your values are.
Estimates put Klan membership at somewhere upward of 4 million members, which was a really significant proportion of the country's population, especially when we consider all of the groups who were excluded from joining the Klan. You were only allowed to become a Klan member if you had been born in the United States, if you were white, and if you were a Protestant. And so when we think about it, narrowing the population down along those lines, 4 million members is a terrifyingly large percentage of that population.
As the cameras focused on the march, another scene was taking place off-screen. Lobbyists for the Klan were working overtime in the background. Their influence on American political life was considerable. In the 1920s, the Invisible Empire got 11 governors, 75 representatives, and 16 senators elected. Harry Truman, the future American president, admitted in his memoirs that he had briefly belonged to the Klan in his youth for electoral reasons.
Because democracy is of the devil.
I think that the first people who should read this book are our brothers and sisters in the United States, because their threat is in their own house. The devil is right at home. The devil himself is right in the house. And the devil came here yesterday. Yesterday, the devil came here. Right here. Right here. And it smells of sulfur still today. This table that I am now standing in front of. Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, from this rostrum, the President of the United States, the gentleman to whom I refer as the devil, came here talking as if he owned the world. Truly, as the owner of the world. I think we could call a psychiatrist to analyze yesterday's statement made by the President of the United States. As the spokesman of imperialism, he came to share his nostrums, to try to preserve the current pattern of domination, exploitation, and pillage of the peoples of the world. An Alfred Hitchcock movie could use it as a scenario. I would even propose a title: The Devil's Recipe. As Chomsky says here clearly and in depth, the American empire is doing all it can to consolidate its hegemonistic system of domination, and we cannot allow them to do that. We cannot allow world dictatorship to be consolidated.
That's why it only serves the devil, the so-called white man.
The true terrorists of our world do not meet at the docks at midnight or scream Allah Akbar before some violent action. The true terrorists of our world wear $5,000 suits and work in the highest positions of finance, government, and business. So, what do? How do we stop a system of greed and corruption that has so much power and momentum? How do we stop this aberrant group behavior which feels no compassion for, say, the millions slaughtered in Iraq and Afghanistan, so the corporatocracy can control energy resources and opium production for Wall Street profit?